The sound of gunshots echoed through the dusty streets of Owyhee, Nevada, as Vivian Palmer stepped off the stagecoach, her heart pounding like a war drum against her ribs. It was 1878, and she'd traveled nearly 2,000 miles to marry a man she'd never met, a decision she was beginning to regret with every fiber of her being. "Welcome to Owyhee, miss," said the stagecoach driver, handing down her worn leather trunk. "Someone meeting you?" Vivian smoothed her travel-creased skirts, squinting in the harsh afternoon sunlight. "Yes, Mr. Harlan Blackstone. Do you know him?" The driver's friendly expression faltered. "Blackstone Ranch, north of town." "Yes, madam, I know of him." He hesitated, then added in a lower voice, "You his mail-order bride?" "I am," Vivian replied, a tremor of uncertainty in her voice. The driver's reaction did nothing to calm her nerves. She'd answered Mr. Blackstone's advertisement in desperation after her parents' death left her penniless in Philadelphia. His letters had been brief but promised security, a commodity she couldn't afford to refuse. "Well, he ain't here yet," the driver said. "Might want to wait in the hotel across the way. Safest place in town for a lady alone." Vivian was about to thank him when the saloon doors burst open. A man stumbled out, blood streaming from his nose, followed by another man who moved with the confident grace of someone completely in command of his body. The second man wore a dusty black hat, faded denim pants, and a blue shirt with the sleeves rolled up to reveal tanned, muscular forearms. "Next time pay your debts, Wilson," the man in the black hat called after the bleeding fellow. "I won't be so gentle." The stagecoach driver chuckled. "That's Jake Miller. Best ranch hand in the territory, works at the Double Circle Ranch. Not a man to cross in a fair fight." Jake turned, seeming to notice the stagecoach for the first time. His eyes a striking shade of blue that reminded Vivian of a summer sky locked with hers. For a moment, everything around them seemed to fade away. Then he touched the brim of his hat in greeting, a slight smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "Afternoon, madam," he called. "Welcome to Owyhee." Before Vivian could respond, the thunder of approaching hooves drew her attention. 3 riders were coming down the main street, and the reaction from the townsfolk was immediate. People stepped quickly off the boardwalks, ducking into doorways. The stagecoach driver muttered something under his breath and began busying himself with the luggage. "That'll be Mr. Blackstone now," he said quietly. The lead rider was a large man with a thick mustache and cold, calculating eyes. He wore expensive clothes that somehow still looked wrong on his frame, as if trying to disguise what lay beneath. His companions flanked him like guard dogs, hands resting near their gun belts. "Miss Palmer?" Blackstone's voice was surprisingly soft, but there was something in his tone that made Vivian's skin crawl. "Mr. Blackstone," she acknowledged, forcing herself to remain composed. He dismounted, moving toward her with an appraising look that made her feel like livestock at auction. "You're prettier than your photograph." "That's good." He reached for her arm. "Come along now. We've a long ride to the ranch, and I don't like to waste daylight. Shouldn't we get better acquainted first? Perhaps have a meal in town?" Vivian suggested, suddenly desperate to delay the inevitable. Blackstone's grip tightened. "We'll get acquainted plenty at the ranch, Miss Palmer. You're mine now, paid for and delivered." He smiled, revealing tobacco-stained teeth. "The preacher will be by tomorrow to make it official." From the corner of her eye, Vivian saw Jake Miller watching the exchange, his posture tense. "Mr. Blackstone," Jake called, stepping forward. "Why not show the lady some courtesy? She's had a long journey." Blackstone's eyes narrowed. "This isn't your concern, Miller. I know you've had your eye on my land, but you've no business with my bride." "Not talking about your land," Jake replied evenly. "Just suggesting you might treat the lady with respect." The 2 men stared at each other, tension crackling between them like lightning before a storm. Vivian could feel Blackstone's fingers digging painfully into her arm. "I paid good money to bring her here," Blackstone said, his voice dangerously quiet. "And what's mine is mine." Jake's hand moved imperceptibly closer to his holstered pistol. A woman isn't property, Blackstone. For a moment, Vivian was certain violence would erupt. Then Blackstone laughed, a sound without humor. Always playing the hero, Miller. One of these days it'll get you killed. He turned to Vivian. Come along, Miss Palmer. You'll soon learn how things work out here. As Blackstone pulled her toward his waiting horse, Vivian cast a desperate look back at Jake. Their eyes met, and something unspoken passed between them, a promise, perhaps, or a warning. Then she was being hoisted uncomfortably onto Blackstone's horse, her trunk loaded onto one of his men's mounts, and they were galloping out of town. The Blackstone ranch was impressive in size but showed signs of neglect. The main house was large but weathered, with peeling paint and missing roof shingles. Several ranch hands worked in the distance, but none looked up as they rode in. Vivian noticed they all bore the same beaten-down expression. This will be your home now, Blackstone said as he helped her down from the horse, his hands lingering inappropriately at her waist. It's very grand, Vivian lied, trying to find something positive to say. A harsh laugh escaped him. No need for pretense, Miss Palmer. It's seen better days. But with a woman's touch it'll improve. And after we're married, I'll own the water rights to half the county. Then we'll see who's laughing. Inside, the house was dark and musty. A thin woman with graying hair emerged from what appeared to be the kitchen. This is Mrs. Cooper, the housekeeper, Blackstone said dismissively. She'll show you to your room. You'll stay there until the ceremony tomorrow. Tomorrow? Vivian couldn't keep the alarm from her voice. But sir, I've only just arrived. Surely we need time to. Blackstone's hand shot out, gripping her chin. I didn't bring you here for your opinions, Miss Palmer. I brought you here to be my wife. The sooner that happens, the sooner you can fulfill your duties. His eyes roamed over her body in a way that made her stomach clench. All of them. He released her and stormed out, leaving Vivian trembling. Mrs. Cooper approached cautiously. Come, miss, she said softly. I'll show you upstairs. Once they were alone in a small, sparsely furnished bedroom, the older woman's demeanor changed. You shouldn't have come here, she whispered. I didn't have a choice, Vivian replied, fighting back tears. My parents died, leaving nothing but debts. It was this or the streets. Mrs. Cooper's expression softened. Mr. Blackstone has had 3 wives before you. The first died of fever, though she never seemed sick until the day before she passed. The second fell down the stairs with bruises already on her face. The third ran away. They found her in the desert. She didn't need to elaborate further. Terror gripped Vivian's heart. What am I to do? Nothing tonight, Mrs. Cooper advised. I'll bring you some food. Rest. And pray for a miracle. After the housekeeper left, Vivian sat on the bed, her mind racing. She'd used the last of her money for this journey. She knew no one in Nevada. And tomorrow, she would be legally bound to a monster. As darkness fell, she moved to the window, looking out at the vast, star-filled sky. In the distance, she could see the twinkling lights of Owyhee. She thought of Jake Miller, of the way he'd stood up to Blackstone, of the unspoken promise in his eyes. A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. Mrs. Cooper entered with a tray of food, looking nervous. Eat quickly, she whispered. Mr. Blackstone is drinking heavily tonight. When he drinks, he often decides he doesn't want to wait for what's his. Vivian's blood ran cold. You mean? Yes. Lock your door, miss. And push the dresser against it if you can. After the housekeeper left, Vivian did exactly that, though the heavy wooden dresser barely moved under her strength. She ate little of the food, her appetite gone. Then she sat in a chair by the window, too afraid to sleep, watching as the hours crawled by. It was past midnight when she heard heavy footsteps on the stairs, followed by the sound of someone trying the door handle. When it wouldn't budge, Blackstone's voice rang out. Open this door, woman! This is my house, and you'll do as I say. Vivian remained silent, heart pounding. "I know you're in there." He pounded on the door hard enough to make it rattle on its hinges. "Open up, or I'll break it down!" For several terrifying minutes, he alternated between threats and cajoling, his words increasingly slurred. Then there was a crash as he threw his weight against the door. The wood splintered slightly at the frame. One more good hit, and he'd be through. Vivian looked desperately around the room for a weapon, finding nothing but a hairbrush and a water pitcher. Then her eyes fell on the window. They were on the second floor, but below was a sloped roof over the porch. If she could reach it. Another crash against the door decided her. Throwing open the window, she gathered her skirts and climbed out just as the door gave way with a final splintering crack. "Where are you, you little—" Blackstone's voice cut off as he saw the open window. Vivian scrambled across the sloped roof, nearly losing her footing. At the edge, she hesitated. It was a long drop to the ground, but Blackstone's angry face appearing at the window made the decision for her. She jumped, hitting the ground hard and feeling a sharp pain in her ankle. Ignoring it, she ran into the darkness, heading for the distant lights of town, her only thought to put as much distance between herself and Blackstone as possible. Behind her, she could hear shouting as Blackstone roused his men. The night was cold, and her thin dress offered little protection. Her ankle throbbed with each step, slowing her progress. She knew she couldn't outrun men on horseback. When she heard the sound of hoofbeats in the distance, despair threatened to overwhelm her. But then, miraculously, another sound joined the first. More riders, coming from the direction of town. The two groups converged somewhere behind her, and she heard shouting, though she couldn't make out the words. She kept running, or limping rather, until strong hands suddenly caught her shoulders. She screamed, struggling against the grip. "Miss Palmer! Vivian! It's me, Jake Miller!" She sagged with relief, recognizing his voice. In the moonlight, she could see his concerned face. He tried to," she stammered. "I know," Jake said grimly. "Mrs. Cooper sent word to town. We came as soon as we could." Only then did Vivian notice the men with him, 5 cowboys, all armed. Further back, she could see Blackstone and his men being held at gunpoint by the sheriff and several deputies. "You can't take her!" Blackstone was shouting. "She's my property!" "She ain't property at all, Harlan," the sheriff replied. "And attempting to force yourself on a woman is a crime, even out here." Jake helped Vivian onto his horse, mounting behind her. His arms around her provided both support and comfort. "I'm taking you to town," he said softly. "You'll be safe there." As they rode away, Vivian leaned back against Jake's solid chest, exhaustion and relief washing over her in equal measure. In Owyhee, Jake took her to the small hotel, where the proprietor's wife, Mrs. Layton, quickly took charge. "You poor dear," she clucked, helping Vivian to a room. "I knew no good would come of you going with that man. But you're safe now." After Mrs. Layton had fussed over her ankle, merely sprained, not broken, and provided her with a nightgown, Vivian found herself alone for the first time since her ordeal began. The room was simple but clean, with a real bed and fresh linens, luxury compared to Blackstone's ranch. She was just drifting off to sleep when a soft knock sounded at her door. "Miss Palmer? It's Jake Miller. I wanted to check if you need anything." She opened the door to find him standing awkwardly in the hallway, hat in hands. The sight of his concerned face brought tears to her eyes. "Thank you," she whispered. "If you hadn't come—" "Don't think on it," he said. "I should have stopped you from leaving with him in the first place." "How did you know to come tonight?" Jake sighed. "Mrs. Cooper sent one of the stable boys to town with a message. Said Blackstone was drinking and talking about not waiting for the wedding." His jaw clenched. "Men like him give the rest of us a bad name." "What happens now?" Vivian asked, suddenly aware of her precarious situation. "I have nowhere to go, no money. The sheriff's holding Blackstone, but I doubt charges will stick. His kind have a way of slipping free." Jake hesitated. "As for you, Mrs. Layton mentioned they could use help at the hotel. It's not much, but it would give you a place until you decide what you want. Vivian nodded gratefully. That's very kind. I've worked as a seamstress before, and I can cook and clean. You should rest now, Jake said, stepping back. I'll check on you tomorrow. True to his word, Jake returned the next day, bringing news that Blackstone had indeed been released. The sheriff warned him to stay away from you, Jake explained as they sat in the hotel's small dining room. But I wouldn't put much faith in that keeping him at bay for long. Then I'm still in danger, Vivian said quietly. Not while I'm here, Jake replied, his blue eyes intense. I've spoken with the boys at Double Circle. We're taking turns watching the hotel. Blackstone won't get near you. Over the next few days, Vivian settled into a routine at the hotel. Mrs. Layton was kind, if talkative, and the work wasn't difficult. Each day, Jake would stop by, sometimes just for a few minutes, other times staying to share a meal. She learned he'd come west after the war, working his way up from nothing to become foreman at one of the largest ranches in the territory. The owner's getting on in years, Jake explained one evening as they sat on the hotel's porch. No family to speak of. He's thinking of selling soon. What will you do then? Vivian asked. Jake smiled, a dreamy look crossing his face. I've been saving. Not enough to buy Double Circle, but maybe enough for a smaller spread. A man needs his own land out here. And a family? The question slipped out before Vivian could stop it. His eyes met hers. Yes, that too. When the time is right. A week passed, then two. Vivian began to hope that perhaps Blackstone had decided she wasn't worth the trouble. But her hope was shattered one afternoon when he appeared in the hotel lobby, flanked by his two ever-present men. There you are, he said, his voice silky with menace. I've come to take you home, my dear. Mrs. Layton stepped between them. She's not going anywhere with you, Mr. Blackstone. I beg to differ, Blackstone replied, producing a document from his jacket. This is our contract. She agreed to marry me in exchange for passage west. I've fulfilled my part. Now she'll fulfill hers, or face prosecution for fraud. That's not how it works, Mrs. Layton protested, but Vivian could see uncertainty in her eyes. Actually, it is, Blackstone smirked. I've consulted the territorial judge. He's quite clear on the matter. Either she honors our agreement, or she'll face jail. Vivian felt the blood drain from her face. I can repay the passage money, she said, though she knew her meager savings from 2 weeks' work wouldn't cover it. It's not about the money, Blackstone replied. It's about the principle. You're mine, bought and paid for. Just then, the hotel door swung open, and Jake entered. He assessed the situation in an instant, his hand dropping to his gun. I thought we'd settled this, Blackstone, he said quietly. This is none of your concern, Miller, Blackstone snapped. The law's on my side now. Is it? Jake reached into his own pocket, producing a telegram. I wired some contacts in Philadelphia after Miss Palmer told me her story. Seems there's a warrant for your arrest back east. Fraud, extortion, even murder. Your real name is Harold Becker. You've been running this mail-order bride scheme across 3 territories. Blackstone's face contorted with rage. You're lying. Sheriff has the full telegram. He's on his way now. Jake stepped closer. Leave Miss Palmer alone and ride out while you can, or face a hanging. For a tense moment, it seemed Blackstone might draw his weapon. But then, with a final venomous glare at Vivian, he backed toward the door. This isn't over, he hissed, before disappearing into the street, his men close behind. That evening, Jake explained everything to Vivian as they sat in the sheriff's office. Blackstone or Becker has been doing this for years. Advertising for brides, bringing them west, then either forcing them into marriage for their property, or worse. Jake's voice was tight with anger. You're not the first, but you might be the last. The sheriff sent wires to every territory. They'll catch him. Thank you, Vivian said, tears in her eyes. I don't know how to repay you. No repayment necessary, Jake replied softly. Just seeing you safe is enough. As spring turned to summer, Vivian's position at the hotel became permanent. She made friends in town, sent letters back east to distant relatives letting them know she was safe, and gradually began to feel that Owyhee might become a real home. Jake remained a constant presence, his visits becoming longer and more frequent. They would take walks through town in the evenings, or ride out to the surrounding countryside on his days off. Vivian found herself looking forward to these outings more than anything else. One afternoon, as they sat by a stream a few miles from town, Jake suddenly grew serious. I've been meaning to tell you, he said. Old man Patterson at Double Circle finally decided to sell. Vivian's heart sank. Would this mean Jake would leave? Who's buying it? She asked, trying to keep her voice steady. Well, that's the thing. He grinned. I am. Or part of it, at least. Patterson agreed to sell me the north section, about 800 acres, including the creek and the best grazing land. Said he'd rather see it go to someone who loves it than some eastern speculator. Jake, that's wonderful! Vivian exclaimed, genuinely happy for him. It will be, he said, taking her hand. But land alone doesn't make a home, Vivian. Her heart began to race as she realized what he might be saying. I know we haven't known each other long, and you came west expecting something very different, Jake continued. But these past months, getting to know you, I've never felt this way about anyone. Nor I, Vivian admitted, squeezing his hand. I'm not a wealthy man, and ranching is hard work. But I swear I'd cherish you every day of our lives. If you'd consider. He took a deep breath. Vivian Palmer, would you marry me? Yes, she said without hesitation, joy bubbling up inside her. Yes, I would be honored to be your wife. Their wedding took place in October, a simple ceremony in the town's small church. The entire community turned out to witness their vows, and even Mrs. Cooper from the Blackstone ranch made an appearance, tearfully telling Vivian how happy she was that something good had come from such darkness. After the ceremony, Jake surprised Vivian by taking her not to the small cabin he'd been living in, but to a brand new house on his property. I've been building it for months, he explained as he carried her across the threshold. Wanted it to be perfect for you. The house wasn't large or grand like Blackstone's, but it was solid and bright, with big windows that caught the sunset. Most importantly, it was filled with love. News reached them that winter that Harlan Blackstone had been captured trying to cross into Mexico. He would stand trial for multiple crimes, with little chance of escaping justice this time. It's really over, Vivian said as she and Jake sat before their fireplace on a cold December evening. It is, Jake agreed, pulling her closer. Though I'd do it all again. The moment I saw you step off that stagecoach, I knew my life would never be the same. Even though I was promised to another man? She teased. Jake's eyes grew serious. You were never his, Vivian. Not really. Some promises aren't meant to be kept. As spring returned to Owyhee, Vivian and Jake's ranch began to flourish. They added cattle, then horses, working side by side to build something lasting. When Vivian discovered she was expecting their first child, their happiness seemed complete. Their son, William, was born on a crisp autumn day, followed 2 years later by a daughter they named Elizabeth. The children grew strong in the clean Nevada air, learning to ride almost before they could walk. 5 years after they wed, as they sat on their porch watching their children play, a letter arrived that changed everything again. Vivian's elderly aunt had passed away in Philadelphia, leaving her a substantial inheritance. We could go east, Jake suggested that night. Buy a bigger place, give the children more opportunities. But Vivian shook her head. This is our home. Everything I love is here. She smiled at her husband. But perhaps we could expand? Buy more land, build the ranch of your dreams? With the inheritance, they were able to purchase the rest of Double Circle when old Patterson finally retired to California. The Miller Ranch, as it became known, grew into one of the most respected in Nevada territory. They added a larger house as their family expanded to include 2 more sons, but kept the original as a reminder of their beginning. 20 years after Vivian had first stepped off that stagecoach, she and Jake sat on their porch, watching their grandchildren play in the yard. "Do you ever regret it?" Jake asked suddenly. "Coming west, after everything that happened?" Vivian looked at her husband, his face now lined with years of sun and wind, his hair streaked with silver, but his blue eyes still as kind and determined as the day he'd stood up to Blackstone. "Not for a moment," she said, taking his weathered hand in hers. "I came looking for security but found love instead. How could I regret that?" Jake smiled, bringing her hand to his lips. "Not while I'm here," he said softly, echoing the promise he'd made so many years ago. A promise he'd kept every day since. As the sun set over their land, painting the sky in brilliant golds and reds, Vivian knew that despite its rocky beginning, her journey west had led her exactly where she was meant to be, in the arms of a good man, surrounded by the family they built together, in a place they could truly call home.